"2018, or as I'll be referring to it from here on out, I lived, bitch, was not a very good year. I mean, can it get much worse than I lived, bitch? Outside of maybe nuclear strikes, complete ozone depletion, or a goddamn Teletubbies reboot, I kinda don't see how anymore. I know it can't get much worse as far as the music scene goes. While there were definite standouts, don't worry, we'll cover those later, most of this year just kinda generally sucked. So much of I Lived Bitch's music was just bleh. And the weirdest thing too is that it was bad, but not like in an infuriating, befuddling, or even an entertaining kind of way, much to my chagrin. So much of this year's music was just dreary and dull and gray and boring and lifeless and just kind of there. Oh, so much of I Lived Bitch's music left about as much impact on me as an empty cardboard box falling onto my head. Real talk, I could barely even scrape together 10 albums that were bad enough to even merit any kind of mention. Hell, I'm amazed I was able to find 5 dishonorable mentions on top of that. Overall, most artists in I Lived Bitch just weren't trying very hard. Like, I barely even care. They obviously didn't, so why the hell should all of us? Let's get started. Usual list rules apply. Those being, of course, it's only my opinion. Don't take it super duper seriously. My opinion can change on certain albums throughout the year, and I didn't get a chance to listen to absolutely everything. And if you're gonna throw a shit fit about the albums on this list, please do it somewhere where the rest of us don't have to smell it. I Lived Bitch was shitty enough. Leave yo shit in I Lived Bitch. Dishonorable mentions. I mean, seriously, do you see the dross I have to work with here? I hate to even include Godsmack on a worst list. It's too freaking obvious. Of course, an orange is orange. Of course, a fly is capable of flight. Of course, Godsmack sucks. They've always sucked. They're not very talented, so they will likely always suck. This is about as controversial of a choice for a worst of I Lived Bitch list as asking my fat ass whether I want another donut, but they happened to release a particularly sucky album this year that tried to be all generic and alt-rocky, so for sucking in a slightly suckier manner than they usually suck, these suckers make my suck list. Suck. I mean, fuck. They aren't even the worst band to try pulling off this trick this year. I mean, I expected them to try to go the mom rock route at some point. What the hell else were they gonna do? Godsmack is basically just Puddle of Mud for the soccer mom set who got bridge piercings in the 90s instead of tramp stamps. Godsmack, if I were you, I wouldn't be bragging about my legend rising. Based on what I heard on this record, your rising legend would get a lot of laughs in the locker room. Again, do you see what I mean here? Like, this isn't even slightly challenging. Imagine Dragons makes a worst of the year list? Oh, better get a janitor to lay out dozens of caution broken glass signs for all the monocles that just got popped. Goddamn, hot take. Ooh. So yeah, y'all probably saw this one coming, though to be fair, I heard a fair amount of people pooping their pants over this particular album. Hell, in my eyes, believe it or not, it's actually quite the improvement over Evolve. Remember fucking Evolve? Evolve had its goddamn tepid-ass trap beats and its squeaking chipmunk stretched-out vocals that made my ears bleed, my soul cry, and it finally made me realize why people hated Lil Diva so much. Yeah, that album sucked, but people, it's time for some real talk. Most Imagine Dragons albums have sucked. Imagine Dragons being terrible is not a new thing. Not anymore, it certainly isn't. They've been terrible since their second album, but on this record, all they've really done here is just readjusted themselves from absolutely grating back to bland, forgettable background music you vaguely hear over a mall loudspeaker while shopping for khakis at the motherfucking Gap. Yeah, it sucks, but who cares? I've said in the past that Imagine Dragons makes music specifically to be ignored. How about we do a better job of that in the upcoming years, eh? Okay, see, this album right here, I honestly hate to even include this on the list. It's really not that bad. I mean, it's unbelievably boring and dreary and so low tempo. I literally used it as a sleep aid for the first few weeks it came out. Not kidding about that, by the way. I slept like a baby during those first 2 weeks. Thanks, 1975, I guess. But, you know, even despite all that, I didn't, outright hate this album. I mean, it's the worst thing they've put out to date, but hell, it's not awful by any means, especially for 2018. It has a right to exist, sure, but you know what ultimately ended up convincing me to include this record here? 5 words. Fickle Friends and Pale Waves. In a year where the 1975 could have absolutely killed it if they just released an album that had even an inkling, a trace of their usual charisma, they just decided not to. Because fuck you, this year should have been an easy slam dunk for the 1975 to succeed in, but instead of that, not one, but 2 bands in I Lived Bitch put out better 1975 albums than the goddamn 1975. One of them with the 1975's help, no less. I mean, just think about that, people. How depressing is that? I get that the band doesn't want to get typecast into a certain kind of sound, and props for at least trying to innovate, I guess, but this wishy-washy, Radiohead plagiarizing half-assery is not what the year needed more of. Seriously, guys, stop trying to be Radiohead. You're not Radiohead. You'll never be Radiohead. You aren't even slightly intelligent or talented enough to be Radiohead, and Radiohead hasn't even gone anywhere yet, so stop trying to be Radiohead before Tom York kicks your skinny, precious, pretentious little asses. Poor Amity Affliction. This is a band that a lot of people really seem to despise for one reason or another. I catch a lot of bile thrown my way when this band's name usually comes up. A lot of people have actually been aching for me to talk about them for a long time now. In the same way that a lot of people want to see what Tony Stark is going to do to Thanos' face in Endgame. Truth be told, though, I kind of like some of the stuff I've heard from these guys. In fact, I remembered quite liking Let the Ocean Take Me back in the day. I was hoping this album would prove to be a welcome surprise underdog for the year, but instead it was a completely different animal. An animal that ravaged its way through I Lived Bitch with a tyranny only matched by the campaigns of Genghis Khan, the wickedness of Richard III, or your average EA game. Cower in fear and be befuddled that I failed to mention them during the Imagine Dragons segment, because this album fell to the Imagine Dragon. This foul creature devoured so many artists this year and shat them back out into bland, innocuous, electronica farting pop rock, and these guys were definitely one of its more notable victims. This album got Imagine Dragoned hard. Hell, this thing is basically what Imagine Dragons would probably sound like after 1 or 2 energy drinks. That is to say, still dozy as fuck. Bad luck, guys. Maybe next time try not jumping onto trends that are absolutely wretched. Oh, stop giving me that look. This deserves to be here and you bloody well know it. Though even then, I still hate to include it. It wasn't nearly as bad as we all thought it was going to be. For that, I almost applaud it, you know, but this gets on here for the mere principle of the thing. This was a bad idea that nobody wanted in a year that was the absolute worst time for them to try something like this. But, you know, Muse is a very bold and a very experimental band. It's almost expected for them to go against the grain. And to this album's credit, it wasn't cynical, not by any means. You can really feel the genuine effort and creativity poured into this thing, and I can sincerely tell they really believed this was a good idea. In the same way, a bunch of British voters believed, ooh, maybe it would be nicer to have blue passports again. People, look, I hate being that guy, but the Care Bears were completely full of shit. Just because you believe in something doesn't mean it's gonna be any good. Best to learn this lesson now before you have kids and have the lesson thrust upon you. Look, this album was just not a fun experience to sit through. And I think a lot of people were banking on Muse to be one of those acts that saved the year for them. But instead, they were too busy binge watching Stranger Things and Ready Player One to actually give a fuck. Muse, I'm putting you on this list simply as my way of saying, don't ever do this again, okay? Okay, that's the dishonorable mentions done, thank God. Let's just slide the door over the coffin of this year's fetid corpse and drive these 10 final nails into it before it really starts to stink up the place, shall we? Oh dear God, albums like this are every critic's worst nightmare. Like I said in the Fimi episode, I sincerely appreciate the intent behind this album. I'm a twice-over suicide survivor myself, so believe me, I know firsthand how important it is to support causes like this. Their heart was definitely in the right place, but oh, the music on this thing just... why? So many of the song choices here do not reflect the topic at hand very well. I understand that sometimes the strangest things can serve as a source of hope. Believe me, I do understand that. But I just cannot help but tug my collar a little bit at Semi-Charmed Life being on an anti-suicide album. Hey kids, don't kill yourselves. Try meth instead. Just saying, some of the song choices here unintentionally muddies the message a wee bit. And speaking of Semi-Charmed Life, what the fuck was that rendition supposed to be, Dance Gavin Dance? That was fucking terrible. That was one of the worst songs of the year. That sounded like Third Eye Blind being shoved into a wood chipper that had rabies. Seriously, real talk, some of these covers are just outright terrible. Bullet with Butterfly Wings was done so poorly by Taking Back Sunday that it made me genuinely worry that Adam Lazzara may have fallen off the wagon again. Dream State's cover of Crawling left so much to be desired. And you know what? Call me a cynical bastard, but the world really did not need yet another Pop Goes Punk version of such great heights. I mean, people, I'm glad the money from this album went to a good cause, for certain, but if it's all the same to you, I'd much rather just give my $10 to the Trevor Foundation directly. Whew, this album... Do I need to say anything at all? I could sum up my entire review here by saying Imagine Dragon and just leaving it at that, couldn't I? Oh, no, that's not what you people come here for, is it? I guess I'll try to go a little more in depth. Yeah, this one was a great big piece of crap, but this one's kind of low on my list because, to be honest, I wasn't expecting too much out of Bullet for My Valentine. I've never had much of a horse in the Bullet for My Valentine race, so, you know, it sucks, but it's hard to care about. That's always been the biggest problem with Bullet for My Valentine, isn't it? They are genuinely a hard band to give any kind of damn about. They've always felt like a bunch of Johnny-come-latelys who change their sound all the time, not based on original ideas or sincere artistic passions, but, you know, just because that's what's hot right now. Hey, look, My Chemical Romance is hot right now. No, wait, Killswitch Engage is hot right now. No, wait, Xanax is hot right now. And in a year like I Lived, bitch, oh, these guys were a prime candidate for the Imagine Dragon to devour. Hell, these guys didn't succumb to the Imagine Dragon so much as sprinkle themselves in parsley and shake their buttocks at it, making suggestive noises. We want to be popular, boys. So yeah, people, I have absolutely no sympathy for this band. Their constant, transparent, trend-chasing ways have finally got them producing complete dog shit. A completely spineless record by a completely spineless band. Again, it sucks, but, like, who cares? Though here's an act I was foolish enough to care about in I Lived Bitch. Oh, but this one's really more my own fault than anybody else's. Nobody cared about this record. Did any of you even know this album came out? Hell, how many of you realized Our Lady Peace was even still around? Well, they are, I promise you, for better or for worse. Speaking as a longtime fan of this band, it does kind of feel like most people gave up on them after Gravity. No, not you, go away! And while I still posit that Gravity is a very good album, it did kind of signal the beginning of the end for these guys. Every album after that one has just been one increasingly dreary, milquetoast, dead-eyed slog after another, and this album is the dreariest, sloggiest, milkiest piece of toast they've ever put out. But you know, again, like so many other of the year's worst albums, it's hard to even get upset about it. Hell, it's hard to say anything at all about this snooze fest. It's so low effort, so low stakes, so little of a shit was given about this album. Even the title feels half-assed. What should we call this album, Rain? I don't know, just Somethingness. I don't know, we'll think of a better title when someone decides to give a damn. Too bad that never happened. And god damn it, I hate saying this about Our Lady Peace too. OLP was one of the most criminally underrated bands of the 90s and early 2000s. Clumsy, Happiness Is Not a Fish, and Spiritual Machines are still outright classics, and I'd love to be able to tell you that this is a great band that you simply haven't given the proper time of day to, most likely. But oh my god, with every passing record they seem to put out lately, they make that argument hold less and less water. You know, in retrospect, Somethingness is an exquisite title for this album. It isn't entertaining, it isn't enjoyable, it's barely even music. It's something? And frankly, it's something you're better off just ignoring. What's even sadder is that this isn't even the most egregious example of one of my favorite bands ever completely phoning it in. No, that honor goes to Stone Temple Pilots. I mean, you want to talk about zero fucks being given? These guys didn't even have the energy to give their album a fucking name. At least Our Lady Peace got halfway there? Yes, technically it's self-titled, but Stone Temple Pilots already had a self-titled album. And that was a load of shit as well, so here we are. We haven't made an inch of progress since 2010. Oh my god! But hell, at least the first Stone Temple Pilots self-album had some notable qualities about it. I mean, I'd say there are even one or two songs on that album that are so bad they're good. I mean, what the fuck even is Maver? Their last full record was at least Plan 9 from Outer Space bad. Bad in an enjoyable way. I straight up forgot this album even came out this year. And it's from Stone Temple Pilots. Oh, again, STP is one of those bands I sincerely think gets a bad rap. They were one of the best acts of the grunge era, and when that era ended, they did a very good job of stretching themselves outside of the mold and developing into something more interesting. But this album, oh, this is about as generic as you can get. This may as well have been released as a great value product. I'm amazed this record wasn't a Sam's Club exclusive. Completely ineffectual, completely lifeless, and while Jeff Gutt seems like a perfectly decent fellow, he just doesn't have an eighth of the charisma that Scott Weiland or Chester Bennington had. I'm sorry, dude. Honestly, his presence here just proves a theory that I've had since around Shangri-La-Dee-Da. Scott's personal problems were always a big hindrance to this band, but they were far from the only problems this band had. Oof. Just oof. Oh god, this thing. Honestly, I'm getting to the point where I sincerely regret ever sticking up for this band. I mentioned them as being better than they had any right to be in my old top 10 nu metal bands episode, but good lord, the older I get, the less Disturbed's music holds up for me. The potential was definitely there early on, but man, apart from a few moments here and there, these guys never fully capitalized on it, did they? And after hearing Evolution, I think we can officially call it. Disturbed is done. Over. Finito. I am pretty much completely over these clowns. I mean, Godsmack pulling a let's just try to be alt-rock thing makes sense for them. I mean, hell, going alt-rock basically counts as retirement for a band as shitty as Godsmack. But seeing Disturbed doing this? Disturbed? Oh, that breaks my heart. For one thing, it makes zero fucking sense to see them doing it. Their name is Disturbed. They look like this. Their biggest and most notable hit that everyone recognizes them for has this in the bridge. Mommy, don't hit me. I never hit me like that. Mommy, don't do it. You're hurting me. You guys pretty much committed to the whole disturbing motif when you named your band Disturbed. You of all motherfucking bands cannot go all Disney Channel on us. And secondly, you know that one little flickering saving grace they had with their surprisingly good cover of Sound of Silence? Remember that from a few years back? Yeah, that's pretty much been completely snuffed out, thanks to them trying to redo it 4 to 5 freaking times on this thing. Oh, that song only worked because it was a somewhat original idea. These guys making constant Mr. Meeseeks clones of it only makes me wish they had never bothered to begin with. Oh my god, all the lightweight, acoustic, fluffy bullshit on this record, it's a mess. The last band I figured Disturbed would try to ape was fucking Air Supply, but I Lived Bitch was basically the year of the unpleasant surprise, so here we are. Disturbed is no longer disturbing. Please be sure to hire them for your child's next birthday party, bar mitzvah, or social event. For 25% extra, David Draymond will come dressed to your party as Boo-Wah-Ah-Ah, the friendly alternative rock clown. Oh, silly Boo-Wah-Ah-Ah. Dance for my children. Wait, Tenacious D released an album this year? I hear a lot of you saying to yourselves. Indeed, they did, around early November, believe it or not. But the most likely reason you haven't heard of this one isn't necessarily because it was released super late into the year. You likely haven't heard about it because it sucked! I'm shocked at how bad this album sucked. It's been 6 years since Rise of the Phoenix, and again, in a year where people really needed their musical heroes to come through for them, a new Tenacious D album would have probably hit the spot for a lot of people. But holy fucking shit, they did not even try with this thing. Look at the cover art. Just look at this thing. This looks like it was drawn by a 7-year-old. Did you know that there's a 6-part, hour-long YouTube series that coincides with the album? Oh yeah, it does. All of the art looks exactly like this. And, well, check it out. Here's a clip.
I might have a little something cooked up.
Dude, you were so right. Right? Look at those people.
Yeah, it's still drawings. That's all this is. For an hour! Oh my god, I hate to even bring this up again, but Lil Diva is more animated than this. That's a rubber. Jesus Christ, what happened here? You know, maybe including an album like this is totally going against my rules for reviewing comedy albums, but you know what? Fuck it, I'm going out on a limb here. This thing isn't even slightly funny. It's just Jack Black and Kyle Gass getting high as balls and doing a bunch of shitty impersonations, outdated toilet humor, and weird pot shots at Yo-Yo Ma. Ever wanted to hear Jack Black get his dick sucked by a woman who is also being voiced by Jack Black? This is the album for you then. Also, see a therapist. Good God. Like, the music isn't even good on this record, for God's sakes. That was always a saving grace to Tenacious D, you know? Regardless of whether or not you ever thought Tenacious D was funny, on all those other records, at least the music stood on its own merits. You didn't have to think the album was funny to know the music was legit. This album barely even has music. 90% of the tracks on this thing are barely a minute long. song. It's mostly just these terrible sketches, and the story is awful, and Kyle and Jack do all the voices for no good reason, and the impressions are terrible, and why does this exist? This is easily one of the laziest pieces of shit I saw last year, and in a year like I lived, bitch, where everyone was phoning it in, it's depressing as hell to see Tenacious D doing it too. Not you, D! You know, I'm not actually the biggest Tenacious D fan in the world, and after hearing this record, thank God I'm not the biggest Tenacious D fan in the world. Hearing an album like this would have stung like hell. You know, like this one did. Oh, Frank. Dude, Frank. What the hell happened, man? Well, I know exactly what happened, but still... This album freaking hurts, man. Hurts like Mosquito. Hurts like Hymns. Hurts like... dude, this is so not your best you. I know you were looking to be a comforter and a helping hand in a series of years where the world felt like it was on fire. That in and of itself is a noble goal, but you know the old saying, the road to hell, terrible music, and old-timey cliches is paved on good intentions. And in attempting to be super vulnerable on this record, instead Frank came off as pitiable. This is an album that is literally forcing a smile. This album is so unconvincingly upbeat and inadvertently depressing, it may as well have been the soundtrack to We Happy Few. It coats its melodies in sugary, pop-tinged happiness, but the facade isn't even slightly believable. It's a smile being held on with staples. Songs like 21st Century Survival Blues and Blackout pretend to have cheery messages behind them, but the undercurrent of cynicism and hatred towards thy fellow man just makes them way more unintentionally bleak and terrifying than I think even Frank was setting out to make them be. People are shit, we're all shit, the world is a fucking overclogged toilet in a universe that's nothing more than a Denny's bathroom where God goes to shoot smack, and we're all going to die lonely, cold, naked, and alone, but you and I will make little changes. Ding, 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 ding. My God, I hate that Frank Turner put out an album that reminded me so goddamn much of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. I hated this album. I hated it so much, but man, I can't even say I blame Frank for writing it. I Lived Bitch was a year so vile and terrible that barely anyone was able to make it out unscathed. And you know, even though this record is far from his best work, I have faith that Frank will be able to get himself fixed up, and I know that Frank Turner will put out good music again. Probably after things get a little better. After we all get a little better. But this... well, again, in a year where we could have used some real hope, this album only made things more bleak. At least you get points for trying, Frank. Cannot say the same for Al Jourgensen, though. Like, dude, what the fuck even was this? I am by no means a Ministry aficionado, but even people who love this band couldn't defend this embarrassment. And you know, I kind of should have been an easy enough lay for this thing. I mean, you guys know me. I'm progressive, I'm liberal, I'm lefty, I'm soft. I'm scum! I'm scum! I'm sorry, I just had to get one in there just for kicks. What were we talking about? I've always been frank with you people about where my personal politics lie, not to lord it over anyone or anything, but just because I don't want to be, like, dishonest and dodgy in my review style. So you know, an album that's nothing more than one big gigantic middle finger shoved in the face of this asshole and his miserable fucking cronies, that should have been an easy win for me, you know? But that fact alone wasn't enough to save Prophets of Rage, and it sure as hell isn't enough to save you, Al. This isn't a protest record, it's an edgy, try-hard adolescent's first pathetic belchings onto Facebook after his first American social studies course. And given that it's coming out of the mouth of a man who's in his freaking 60s makes it that much more depressing. This is stupid shit, Al. Made even more stupid sounding by the incoherent noise and dated as hell musical aesthetics Jourgensen decided to implement on this record. I mean, if you think everything that falls out of this evil little turd's mouth is hard enough to listen to on a daily basis in the news, imagine what it sounds like with a bunch of nu metal shit playing over it. Something like this might have gone over better in the early 2000s, but hell, even your early 2000s material would look at this and do a facepalm. And that's saying something, man. The music is bad, the lyrics are dopey, the production is a complete fucking joke. Al, sit down, dude. The effort is appreciated, but you are sincerely not helping. You know what, legit, just fuck these guys. Fuck their shitty, stupid attitude towards their critics, their fans, themselves, and towards everyone in general, basically. Fuck the shitty way they pose for photographers so they can get glamour shots on social media and then limply fart around on stage for 90% of their sets. And fuck this shitty, useless, lazy, whiny, insipid, boring barf bag of an album. Five Finger Death Punch had the easiest fucking layup to make here. They hit rock bottom with the execrable Got Your Six, and all they needed to do was just try a little, just a teensy bit, put out something that wasn't as bad as that, and they'd at least be able to prove themselves to their monster swilling, douche shade sporting, tribal tattooed audience of frat boys, rednecks, and the world's most unfuckable men on OkCupid. Like, these assholes could have at least tried a little bit for their miserable fucking sakes, you know? But no, they somehow farted out an even lazier album full of more wretched cover songs, more lazy cookie cutter guitar work, and more Ivan Moody attempting to win an Olympic gold medal in the being a piece of shit Olympics. Seriously, it's Moody that really kills this album stone dead for me, and this should have been the album where Moody shined his brightest. This should have been the turnaround. Free from his addictions, free from his record label, free to make the best damn album he could make in his entire life, with no restrictions, no bullshit, nothing standing in his way whatsoever. And instead he takes a shit all over Dexter Holland's face, gives the finger to Blabbermouth, and takes a nap on the tour bus. Good God, I didn't think they could get any worse than Got Your Six, but this album showed me there is no length to how much Five Finger Death Punch can suck. If they somehow keep going at this rate, their next album is going to be nothing but a jewel case that contains a picture of Ivan Moody punching your mom in the face. Fuck this shitty band for twats. Oh my God, this year, people, this goddamn year. Ugh. Okay, so here we are, top of the list. I'll bet those of you that are regular viewers of the show are probably a bit concerned right now. There are actually two albums that I kept mentioning over and over throughout the year that many of you probably figured were shoo-ins to be on this particular list. But those of you that can count can see we only have one spot left. So what happened? Sudden change of heart? Did some 11th hour Grinch Who Stole Christmas about face cause my heart to grow 3 sizes that day? Psst. In this year of our Lord, I lived, bitch. Hell no! Fuck both of you! Share it! It's been a while since we've had to do this, hasn't it, people? But at the end of the day, good God, I couldn't even decide. I flip-flopped back and forth over which one of these albums was ultimately worse, until I finally realized that together, they make up everything that was wrong with this miserable, miserable year. As I kept going over the worst albums I heard this year, I started noticing patterns. Almost every god-awful record had one of two major fundamental issues. It was either a misguided, barely listenable train wreck of bad ideas and delusional expectations, or a mediocre, half-ass, barely cooked, cynical cash grab that tried to bank on trends without expanding upon them or even having the most basic understanding of them. And while most of the worst albums of the year were basically an either-or situation with those circumstances, these two, they fell into both categories with a plum. Mania with its absolutely unlistenable electronica farting, dated dubstep noise fuckery, and incomprehensible lyrics, melodies, and vision, and America with its below zero effort, droning, monotonous keyboard masturbations, self-aggrandizing, meaningless lyrics, and for Jared Leto basically recording the audible equivalent of spending an entire weekend in your pajamas eating potato chips and jacking off to Pornhub. Ultimately, while these albums do have very different sonic soundscapes to them, their core issue is one that serves as the biggest example as to why most of I Lived Bitch's music sucked so badly. Nobody gave a shit. Nobody cared. These albums in particular, instead of trying to build something new with them, instead of making meaningful attempts to understand today's music scene and adapt their sound into it accordingly, or even just to go as far as to stick to their guns and make the kind of music they at least knew they were good at making, in lieu of doing any of that, these guys just phoned it in, cashed in their fanboy appreciation checks, and just rode the wave. The fan brats will buy it. Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? They'll still buy it. I despise that attitude when it comes to making music. Any of you who've seen my Ratitude review know I can't stand bands who do that. It shows contempt for the art form, it shows contempt towards the artist's previous work, and at the end of the day, the ultimate contempt, the most contempt, is being pointed directly at you. Yes, you, the audience. No matter how much bile you want to spend pouring into this comment section or that comment section, or wherever you want to shout people down for not praising Precious Senpai, the sad fact is that for all your defending of Precious Senpai has abandoned you. Both of these bands were capable of doing it right. I sincerely believe that. They've done it right in several occasions on the past, and like I've mentioned over and over again, this year was a long, dreadful, and hopeless feeling year. These guys could have been a light of hope for a lot of people had they even begun to care, but they turned out to be yet another force for cynicism, ugliness, and hopelessness. Honestly, I hope these albums kill both of your careers. Fall Out Boy has been begging to die for years now, and Jared Leto is apparently more occupied on building an entire condominium up his own ass than he is about making music these days. So you know what? Yeah, if these are the two albums that finally end the careers of both of these bands, then you know what? Good fucking riddance, because we do not need any more of this useless, lazy, selfish, pretentious shit in this decade. Leave that shit in 2018. Oh my God. So that's the worst list, people. Thank you again for tuning in. Stick around for the best of 2018 list coming soon. I promise it's much less of a drag than this video. Stick around, people. Here's to 2019. Hopefully, we'll all do better, eh?